Hey there, welcome back to Off the Charts. I'm Lionel Cartwright. Today's guest embodies the idea that being a creator isn't just something you do, it's a way of life. If you only look at his resume, Grammy winner, hit songwriter, record producer, Tony-nominated Broadway composer, well, that's already an impressive list. But here's the thing. The bright light of those accomplishments can actually eclipse what really matters, the creative mindset that generated all that work. Think of it this way. The creative works are the fruit. The mindset is the root. The songs, the productions, the compositions, they're powerful, they're compelling, but they all grow out of an attitude, a curiosity, a desire to make something. As Rick Rubin says, it's a way of being. There is so much to explore here that I'm making this a two-part episode. Part one focuses on the early signs of this person's creative drive and how following those instincts led him to write songs recorded by more than 200 artists, including Little Big Town, Kathy Mattea, Peter Frampton, Don Henley, Winona, Faith Hill, Trisha Yearwood, Tyler Hilton, Gabe Dixon, Tim McGraw, Martina McBride, Joe Cocker, Reba McEntire, The Wreckers, Garth Brooks, and Bonnie Raitt, culminating in the 1997 Grammy for Song of the Year, Change the World, recorded by Eric Clapton and Babyface. Part two will explore his shift from songwriting to composing Broadway musicals, which, by the way, earned 10 Tony Award nominations. Impressive fruit, right? And absolutely worthy of every bit of recognition. But the real takeaway here, and what I think you'll find most valuable, is the root that bore the fruit. The mindset, the process, the practices, finishing, the messy middle, and the ongoing curiosity that keeps creation alive. This conversation is a great study in what this podcast is all about, re-examining creative success. Like me, I think you'll be inspired and stirred by my conversation with Wayne Kirkpatrick. Wow, thanks for doing this, man. I really appreciate it. It's fun diving into your history and
looking forward to it.
The amazing things you've done. At first I was thinking not doing this chronologically, but I'm kind of back to that. So I don't think I've ever really asked you, what was your entry ramp like, Wayne, to, getting into music? Was it performing? Was it songwriting? How did you get into this?
Wow, going way back. It depends on how far you want to go back. But when I was, the summer before I was about to go into high school, we moved to a new town, which was, not a great time to move for a teenager. And so I moved right at the tail end of my eighth grade year. So I had the whole summer. I moved to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I didn't know anybody. And I went to a summer camp, and there was somebody that was, there was a counselor there that was playing guitar, and he taught me a few chords. And I had taken piano lessons in elementary school, so I had that under me. But anyway, I went back home from that camp and started teaching myself to play guitar. And I had that whole summer. That's what I did, And then as I was entering into high school and also getting to a point where I could change chords fast enough, I started writing songs. And
wow! And
it became, because I was a pretty quiet, shy individual, and that was kind of a way for me to work out my feelings, and writing, which obviously is a form of expression. And then at that time, when you're writing, you're not only expressing your feelings, you're also kind of discovering your feelings. And the best way to do when you're writing about them, you're kind of confronted with how do you feel about any number of things. So I found that to be very therapeutic for me. And then so I just loved it, and I lived, breathed, and eat, sleep, music, and just was a sponge in the writing realm. And I thought for the longest time that I wanted to be a singer-songwriter, and so I loved people like James Taylor and Jackson Browne and, those kinds of, Carole King, any of that kind of stuff. So, but I lived in Baton Rouge. I didn't know anything about music as a business, or I certainly didn't have a lot of confidence to think that I could, I don't know, be whoever those people were that I was trying to emulate, in my writing. So I, as I graduated high school, I entered into landscape architecture at LSU, Louisiana State University, my dream was to be in music, but I went into landscape architecture as something to fall back on,
Of course.
Yeah. And and then about 3 in my third year at LSU, third year design, I was in a class, a communications class, and the assignment for that class was that you had to do something on camera, and it didn't matter what it was. But because a lot of people in that class were also landscape architecture majors, they would do something like a tutorial on how to pot a plant, or, how to plant a garden, or, those kind of things, and demonstrate something. And when it came my turn, I got up, sat on a stool, and sang a song I wrote.
Awesome.
And when I finished, the professor said, "What are you doing in landscape architecture?"
Wow.
Yeah. And I said, "I don't know."
Wow. Huh.
And so
this is your third year in?
That was my third. Yeah, I was in third year. Yeah.
Wow.
And so that was one of those kind of moments where, I had been obviously in the back of my mind, I was like, I really want to do music, but I just don't know how, and or if I can, or, so those little nudges like that. I then went to my guidance counselor, my college guidance counselor, and kind of told him my dilemma. It's like, I'm not sure if I want to be in landscape architecture, and I'm just kind of trying to figure out what. And he gave me great advice, and he said he went through the same thing, and he said I sat out a semester to just try to figure out what I want to do. And he said, he was very nice. He said, we'd hate to lose you in the program. He said, but maybe you ought to consider doing that. And I did that. I sat out. I sat out a semester. And I looked at the music department at LSU, the, composition and all that. And that was just that was very classical, traditional music. I knew right away I did not fit in there. And then a friend of mine who was also a musician and a budding artist told me about Belmont College in Nashville.
There you go.
And he's like, they have a music business program, and they have a recording studio. And I was like, what? That exists in this world? School, And so me and a friend drove up to Nashville one weekend, and I looked at the school, kind of knocked around Nashville for a couple of days, and I was like, this is it. this is where I need to be, you know. And I applied for the school and for the next semester, and my friend that went with me, who was a guitar player, he was going to be my roommate, and he backed out. So and I was like, well, I'm doing it. And I had also at the time of that had broken up with my then girlfriend. And so, which kind of pushed me into I got to figure out, do something with your life, man,
Right. Totally.
And so I packed up my car, drove the 10 hours to Nashville, terrified. What am I doing? I didn't know a soul when I came here. I didn't know who my roommates were going to be in the dorm when I moved in. It was potluck, and that began my my journey and my pursuit of this. Again, still thinking, artist, a singer songwriter, and so that's kind of how it started.
Wow. For you to say, I'm going to sit out a semester, right?
Yeah.
And then to make that move, it seems like that's a common denominator in so many of our stories. Like at some point you have to make that move.
Yes.
And I don't know if it's courage or you just don't see you don't feel a fit in any other place, right?
Yeah. You know what it was for me? I mean, I had such this yearning to be in music and to write and all, and I knew, Baton Rouge. First of all, the doing something to fall back on is not how you pursue a dream to begin with.
That's so good.
You're all in. If you're really serious about it, you go all in. And so
yes.
there was that element, and then there was also the part that was like, okay, I don't know if I'm good enough, but
sure,
I need to go to Nashville or someplace and see if I can hang with the big boys, as I thought, and see if I can make it. And if I can't, then I will know. I said, but in my mind, even then, at whatever I was, 20, 21 years old, I was like, I don't want to look back 30 years from now and go, what if?
Totally.
Only what if, I want to go, no, I tried it and it didn't work out. And that was not for me. I got it out of my system. Now what am I going to do? So that's kind of the attitude I had, coming up here. And that kind
I feel like
drove me.
We're about the same age, and I try to relate to younger generations the impact that singer-songwriter movement had on our generation.
Yeah.
The James Taylors, even the Jim Croce's, certainly the Carole Kings, that whole swath, Jackson Browne.
Yeah.
Loving the history of the business. I've been watching this series, Wayne, on Netflix on the rise of Hollywood. I think it's called Titans, The Rise of Hollywood.
Yeah, it's on my list. I haven't watched it yet.
It's fascinating to see how those companies that were the purveyors of that art that so moved you and me and people in our generation, how that all started is endlessly fascinating to me. And I really want to get into that with you before we conclude this.
Yeah.
But at least from my standpoint, I'd love to hear your take on this. That little window that really didn't last that long, right? It kind of did, but the late 60s to the mid 70s, there was an explosion of, and I think you could argue in music and film with Scorsese, De Palma, Godfather guy.
Yeah,
Coppola.
Yeah.
Just this explosion of expression and a move away from the old studio systems
Right.
in, again, I think you could argue film and music. But here we are at the prime age to be influenced by what we're hearing on the radio and in the culture. And I don't know about you, but to this day, those singer-songwriters, like wearing their hearts and their experiences on their sleeve, I've just never been able to get far away from that.
Yeah, it's definitely my sweet spot, or my fallback. I constantly go back to listen to those old records, for inspiration, or just I don't know, nostalgia or whatever it is. But and a lot of them are still just so relevant today. It's you
I think
listen
so.
to it, and uh, even I was at a wedding the other night, and every wedding I go to, the wedding bands, it's like they're playing all the old, it's all the old stuff. It's even in the not that he's a singer songwriter category per se, but they kind of are. But stuff like Stevie Wonder and
Oh,
whatever, Casey and the Sunshine Man. But anyway, it's like
yes.
they're the whole night. This is all music from the 70s, the 60s, 70s. And it's kind of analyzed, like, why is that? And there's plenty of good music today,
Absolutely.
and some great singer-songwriters out there.
Absolutely.
So, that are kind of carrying on that tradition, in their own modern way, but some great stuff. But yeah, it's interesting that it's kind of rooted in that era, the singer-songwriter era. And yeah, that's what we cut our teeth on, and you can't shake that. It's in your veins,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know what they were doing. It was a different thing, right? Like if you go certainly 15 years before that, if you go back to the 50s, and there's Doris Day and there's Perry Como, and it's just a different approach. And sure, I think Lennon and McCartney and Dylan really helped prepare the soil for the James Taylors. And of course, James was signed by Apple Records initially. Right. But I just, another thing it's been fascinating to me, our kids got in the magnet school program when they were in junior high and high school here. And so we drove them to school every morning, and they would listen to the music they were listening to. And I was always super curious. So they introduced me to everybody from Sarah Bareilles to Billie Eilish, Ray LaMontagne, Bon Iver. And what really struck me was when I started doing dives into those artists, even they, being a generation at least removed from us, would still cite those same artists that we're talking about.
Right. Yeah.
And I've always felt their presence in your work, Wayne.
Oh, yeah.
With any tributary of your work. But you said something that struck me too about writing kind of being a form of therapy. And it's fascinating to me. I'm not going to name names, but there are artists out there whose writing, when you look at their life and then you look at their writing, it's like, how did that person write that song? And I do think there's something about the practice of writing that is a kind of form of therapy. You get to know, like, maybe deep parts of yourself. You have any thoughts on that?
As you're writing, is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's the part of it. It's like when you're when you're confronted with your own feelings, like because you have to write them, then and when you let yourself go and go to that place. I mean, I just know for me, is sometimes it's like I'll write something and go, oh, I guess that's how I feel about that. And I haven't really been forced to think about it that in depth. And but now I've got to confront it, and now it's like, okay, yeah, this, and you kind of go with it. Then you're kind of opening up, whether it's opening up a new portal, or it's opening up an old wound, or that you did, oh, I never really thought that really affected me that deeply, but obviously it did, because I'm now digging deep within me, and there's like a well that has been tapped.
Yes.
And so, and then at those moments, it's like, then you go, okay, don't plug it up, keep going, let it come out. And that's the kind when it's therapeutic, when you start going, oh, I'm getting close to the bone now. But it's fascinating, and it unlocks things if you let it,
good. Yes.
Yeah.
How would you, as I said, I've always sensed that in your work. How do you reconcile, Wayne, and you've done this beautifully over your career, how do you reconcile that kind of writing that you're talking about? The word reflective to me comes to mind, digging deep, not being afraid to access parts of yourself that maybe are vulnerable, even a little scary. How do you reconcile that? Again, you've done this kind of amazingly with a market sensitivity, because obviously we all want to be successful. You want to be successful. How do those two worlds come together? A personal, being very personal, but also being aware of the market.
Yeah. That's a layered process, because I would say in my cocoon, I really am not driven by the commerciality of something. I mean, that's, and I think, as I hear myself say that, it's not completely true, but it kind of is. At least my intent or my motivation is not, okay, sit down and write something that's going to be a big commercial success.
I feel that in your work. It's
more like, I've got this idea, and I really feel strongly about it. I hope it's also commercial. And but, like, for instance, in writing a song, if you're writing a song, to me, it's not as interesting to go, okay, what would somebody else want to hear here?
Totally.
It's like, I want to, or try to approach, is like, what is best for the song? What is in service of the song? With it might be naive or pie in the sky, but I still believe that if you are authentic, or if you are writing your own truth, that's going to resonate with somebody, and hopefully a lot of people, as opposed to going the route of pandering, or just going for the commercial jugular, and that's not to say that there haven't been times when, have done that, because that's in and of itself has been a challenge, see if we can crack this nut, but more times than not, it's just kind of, it's trying to be in service of the idea, and what's the best thing for the idea. And so reconciling, you hope, I mean, like we talked about earlier, I mean, I grew up on commercial music. So that the commerciality part of it is as much in my veins, inherent in that, as the singer songwriter, the artistic expression of it, you know. And so it's they're not mutually exclusive. And so I you know, when I listen to a song that a singer songwriter does, if it's not hooky, it doesn't interest me as much as something that is catchy, you know. And I think that's because I also grew up, you know, loving catchy songs. and
Right.
and when I first started writing, I will say, you know, just exploring songwriting. I don't know anything about it. I'm all self-taught, and I'm playing songs for a friend of mine, and he said, "That's nice, but there's no hook." And I said, "What's a hook?" And he said, "Well, you know, the part that's catchy, the part that you walk away singing, the part that hooks you in for the other." And to me, in my learning phase, I was like, "Oh my gosh, songs have hooks. That's right. That's why I like them." And I was so energized. Now I'm going to go write songs that have hooks. And that was a revelation. You know, that was a crash course in songwriting. It's like, of course, it's like I knew there was something I liked about some of these songs. I just couldn't, you know, define what they were. And it's like, it was as simple as, oh, songs have hooks. And, you know, so that's the long-winded way to say how I reconcile it is I'm trying to write something that's hopefully meaningful or moving or fun, but is also melodically captivating, or, you know, at the same time, or catchy, or, you know, all of that rolled into one. You can have both.
I totally subscribe to that. And right before we ever knew it, before I ever even knew the word commercial, or we were being influenced by Fire and Rain, or I Feel the Earth Move Under My Feet, or Running on Empty. All those songs were incredibly catchy.
Yeah. And but also incredibly meaningful.
Exactly.
Weighty,
I guess
times, you know.
Absolutely.
Fire and Rain. I mean, come on. That's that's got some layers.
Yeah. I like what you said. I think it's the horse before the cart, is for it to be authentic. And you're authentically mining something, and the commercial considerations aren't driving, they're not, to mix metaphors, they're not driving the bus.
Right. But they're not far away. They're at the next stop, you know.
That's good. Well, Wayne, I mean, there's so many songs of yours I could and want to kind of peer into, but let's just start with one of the biggies. The first time I heard Change the World, I loved it, and I think it's a great example of not just lyrical authenticity, but just melodic and chord progression, fresh. It sounded so fresh. It certainly had hints at blues and R&B, but man, some of those progressions and they weren't like, they didn't make me go like that. And like, oh, that feels so good. How, tell us about how you and Tommy and Gordon, how Tell us about the evolution of that song, because it's so great.
Well, that started with Tommy. So me and Tommy and Gordon used to be in the studio a lot together. If I was, we wrote. Well, me and Gordon had written a lot together, and I was producing records, and I would use those guys. Gordon would play guitar, and Tommy would come and play bass on stuff. So we were in the studios a lot together, and in those situations, you're sitting around and playing each other song ideas that you're working on, that kind of thing. And Tommy had this song idea that he would play around every once in a while, and it was like, oh, that's he had the startings of this thing, and he was actually singing "Change the World" in the
wow.
And
wait, is it Tommy's a drummer, right?
He's a bass player.
Oh, he's a bass player. Yeah. So what was he bringing? Was it a bass part? Was it guitar?
No,
what was that initial?
Like most bass players, he plays guitar too. So he was right. We were sitting around with guitars, and he played this song idea that he had, and it was like, oh, that's cool. And I would say that these were like casual exchanges, and nothing was, the first time we heard it, it was just like, oh, that's cool. And here's something, and blah, blah, blah. Flash forward to, there was a time when me and Gordon, and a couple of auxiliary player, like, we were talking about forming a band, doing the whole, let's do a band and go try to get a record deal as a band,
Okay.
And so it was being steered by me and Gordon primarily. And Tommy was kind of involved, and Chris McHugh, drummer. And so we would go into the studio and record tracks as a band, that kind of thing. Well, as we were looking, putting songs together, we needed another batch of songs. And at one point in one of those studio visits, I remember going, hey, Tommy, put that thing down that idea that you had, just put it on a cassette, and I'll take it and work with it. Mm. And so he had put down what he had, and he sang "Change the World" over it. And so I kind of took that, and the bigger picture is we never sat in the same room and wrote this song together.
Wow.
So it was like so Tommy handed it off to me. I drove around with it. Now, if you know Tommy, Tommy is kind of like a really laid back, chill, peace and love, sunglasses inside kind of guy. Yeah, very chill. And so when he was singing "Change the World," it was like it was kind of an obvious peace and love, kind of coming from a peace and love, we can change the world, kind of.
Oh.
Thing. But for me, as I lived with it, I was like, I was saying this to myself. It was like, I don't think that's what this song is about, and I do often, when you're writing songs, especially if you're writing lyrics, sometimes I think we have like a little a filing system in our mind of memories and feelings and emotions and sometimes you don't write that feeling or emotion as you're having it in the moment. A lot of times you do, but sometimes not. And that was the case with this. I hearkened back to, I mentioned earlier, when I was back at LSU and had broken up, my girlfriend had broken up with, which was a kind of a devastating, I thought she was the one kind of breakup. And in writing "Change the World," I hearkened back to that emotion, which was, if I could change the world, you would be in love with me. And it brought back up all of those feelings that I had in that moment. And so, if I could change the world, I would be the sunlight in your universe, and you would think my love was really something good if I could change the world. It's very much a love song, a pining love song, and so that's where the even in a song that I mean. That became apparent from its release had a commercial value to it, but the song itself, it comes from a very personal and real place, a real, and by the way, that person ended up, we got back together and got married. That was
Fran?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, we just celebrated our 40th anniversary, wedding anniversary. So, and when I wrote that, we had already been married 6 or 7 years, but I hearkened back and drew from that way I felt then, and so anyway. But I will say this too: I had written part of that as far as lyrically, had come up with a chorus and a verse that felt like a second verse, and this song wasn't for anything in particular when I first started working on it. When we were doing this band project and needed another batch of songs, Gordon was like, "Hey, Tommy didn't live in Nashville at the time." He said, I'm driving up to Ohio, why Tommy was there, I don't know. But he said, I was thinking about adding Change the World to this batch of songs. And maybe we'll do a demo while I'm up there with Tommy. And I was like, well, it's not finished. And so Gordon said, well, give me what you got and I'll work on it and try to finish it on the way up to Ohio. It's like, okay. So then he took it and then kind of completed it.
Wow.
And then they did a demo up there. So it was kind of piecemealed together. And then it just kind of went through the pitching process. And then what happened, I mean, if you want to know the full story, we did this band project. We pitched it, and got fairly close. But it's the age old, it's like, hey, we like this. We don't hear a first single. We need something that's a single. And that's why we did the second batch of songs. And in that second batch of songs was Change the World. But they still said, we don't hear a single. And so we didn't get signed as a band. And then Tony Brown, famed record producer of many acts, from George Strait to, did he produce your, was he your, okay.
He sure did.
It's okay. So Tony, and he was producing Winona at the time.
Right.
And so he heard that song and he had it on hold and was going to record it on Winona's album. And it just so happens that a music supervisor from what was then Touchstone Pictures was in his office from LA, and he said, let me play you this song I'm going to cut on Winona. And her name was Kathy Nelson. And he played the song for her. And she remembered that song when she was working on this movie called Phenomenon that John Travolta was in. And she was looking for a vehicle, a music vehicle for Eric Clapton and Babyface to do together.
Amazing.
And she remembered that song that Tony Brown played her in his office. I like to say Tony Brown was our song plugger. And
he's a good one.
Yeah, he was good. And so they recorded it. We had nothing to do with the recording. We would just hear, actually the trajectory that at one point we were like, I've heard that Paul McCartney's going to do it. And, it's like, and that wasn't true. You hear all these stories. And then there was I think Eric Clapton is going to do it, and it's going to be in a Tom Hanks movie, And it's like, and then it was like, oh no, it's not a Tom Hanks movie. It's a John Travolta movie, and Babyface is producing it. And at this point, it's like, I'll believe it when I hear it, because those kind of things fly around. Those kind of stories fly around a lot. And then next thing we know, yeah, they recorded it. They love it. They're going to release it as a single. And this was back when soundtrack albums were a big industry, and you would have a movie soundtrack album, and then they would release some single off of it. And that's what this was. And it was not on an Eric Clapton album. It was
amazing.
It was on the Phenomenon soundtrack until years later when he put it on a compilation record, yeah. So, and honestly, I remember the first time I heard it, they had a copy of it and was listening to it in my studio. And I remember listening to it and thinking, wow, that sounds amazing. I'm not sure I could hear it on the radio, but,
wow.
Yeah. And I'm glad I was wrong about that.
I'm glad you were too.
Yeah.
I bought that soundtrack, and to this day, that soundtrack of Phenomenon was start to finish an incredible. Kathy, the lady you mentioned, did she call all those songs?
Well, she was the music supervisor, so probably so. Yeah.
Well, man, it was powerful. I remember there was a Peter Gabriel song in there. I think I Have the Touch, a song by him.
Oh, yeah.
I was just so inspired by that CD. I wore that thing out.
Yeah.
Well, that makes me want to ask you, so you're saying Tommy, I was confusing Tommy Sims with Tommy Wells, who was a drummer, and Tommy Sims, bass player.
Great bass player.
Yes.
Yeah.
Killer.
Mm-hmm.
So he was going to Ohio. So you guys never sat in the same room. How common is that for you in all of your co-writing history? Is it more common you sit in the same room, or that you don't?
I would say it's more common to sit in the same room. There are a few people that I've worked with in the past who, especially if they're primarily like just music writers, not just music writers, but they write music and don't write lyrics, and like somebody like Michael W. Smith, who I worked with a lot back in the day, and he doesn't write lyrics, and so we were never in the same room. He'd give me his a track or something, and I'd go away and write something and come back and show it to him, sing it to him. And maybe another person that would be Keith Thomas, that who's a producer, a songwriter, but doesn't write lyrics for the most part. And so he would, have a track, and I would just kind of take it and drive around my car and listen to it, and just working solely on lyrics. So in those kind of situations, when it's like there's a music writer and then there's a lyric writer, there's no reason to sit in the room together. Most of the stuff that I do, I write music. I participate in music and lyrics, primarily. So being in the room is preferred,
I haven't shared this with many people, but Wayne, I've been on a songwriting sabbatical.
Oh, yeah?
Because I wanted to write differently. Mm-hmm. And you're hitting on something that when I come back in, which I'm getting ready to do, I'm fascinated by the music first approach. I really want to experiment with that.
Is that not what you do? What have you typically done?
I typically was an idea first guy. Mm-hmm. Like I'd get the idea. The idea, I think, would suggest music or a progression or a groove, and then start working on the lyrics.
When you say get the idea, do you mean like write the whole lyric, or? No. Okay.
No, and I sound like I'm contradicting myself here because I would just have the idea and just see, just kind of music vibey. Where does that want to live? Up tempo, mid tempo, chord progressions. But my influence from Nashville, especially by the end of the 90s, I remember the BMI guys talking about lyric wars, that country music was in a lyric war phase.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. But that's really interesting. When you mention Keith Thomas, I think of the Amy Grant. You had a couple big old pop hits with Amy. And I'm guessing that was with Keith. And so he's sending you a track. What's he sending you that you're driving around listening to?
Well, yeah, actually, I don't think I've had. Well, I've not had any of singles with Amy that I wrote with Keith. But there have had some songs that I've written on her album. I believe that we in those situations it would usually be somebody like that, Keith and Michael before that, just handing me a well, early on it was a cassette, and then later CDs. With the track, the music and melody on it.
So the track was all like they'd already put down a track and they're sending you like a full track?
Sometimes, because sometimes those producers, especially if you're a writer or producer, you're going in and creating some sort of demo that has the vibe of the song in it. Now with Michael, sometimes it would just be a piano vocal.
Okay.
And then singing dummy lyrics, or nonsense words over the top of it to show the melody or the suggestion of the melody. And then, and sometimes in those cases, it might be singing something like in the title position that was like, sings really good. So I was like, oh, I wonder if I can make that mean something. And then, or sometimes it's like, no, there's got to be something different there, and kind of start from the ground up trying to, I've never been, I don't know about you, I've never been that successful. Rarely have I ever done it where I've written an entire lyric and then put music to it. That's hard for me. I mean, Elton John made a career out of it. That's how he and Bernie Taupin wrote. Bernie Taupin would give him lyrics. The way I understand it, Bernie Taupin would give him lyrics, and he'd sit down and crank out some incredible piece of music. And I admire that, and I can't do that. I've maybe done it once or twice, and it doesn't come as naturally to me that way. And to me, music inspires a lyric. Now, like you said, I will sit down. Sometimes I'll have a title and go, I want to write something with this idea, and start formulating, music around it. But and then a lot of times I'll write a piece of music that I like and go, I need to figure out what needs to say lyrically,
I think I'm coming off, Wayne, a prolonged multi-season of doing a lot of this composing work. And while I can crank those out just one after the other, all over the stylistic map, but I guess I've always been a little intimidated, not intimidated. It just sounds like a gutsy. I remember hearing, I think the first time I heard about this was Take It to the Limit with the Eagles, that they had that whole track finished before Henley and Fry wrote the lyric. And I guess I've always just thought, man, that is a gutsy, and maybe it's just the way I came up, like you get songs, and the country thing was, well, if it doesn't work with a guitar vocal, then it's not worth even going in the studio. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, there was that mentality for a while, yeah.
Right. So that kind of sent me down the guitar vocal or piano vocal, well, it's got to be finished there, as opposed to finishing a whole track, which just sounds fun. And while it sounds more doable to me, it's also a little scary, like, wow, so I got this track,
You're
but as
stuck.
I listen, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
But one of the things that led to this sabbatical was two things. Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act, which just blew me away, but also the Paul Simon, I don't know if you call it an audio book. It was basically a long form interview that Malcolm Gladwell did with him. And it was a take on one of his lines called Miracle and Wonder. And a third, Paul McCartney. McCartney said the only song he ever wrote lyrics first was All My Lovin', which he wrote on a bus because he felt a rhythm or something riding on a bus. But Simon, the same way, music first. And what I hear you saying is all these examples of this music first. That's really interesting to me, especially from somebody that's so insanely proficient at lyrics as you, starting from whether it's a piano vocal with nonsense lyrics or just a track. That just sounds really, really interesting.
Well, I mean, there's no wrong way. There's no right or wrong way to do it. It's whatever gets you to the best end result. I mean, ultimately, I look at it as like, how, I think it was Michelangelo who would talk about going to a rock quarry and finding his piece of stone or whatever, and looking at this chunk of stone and going,
That's good.
the figure is already in there. I've just got to set it free,
Wow.
and which is really kind of understating his immense ability to, well,
Sure.
your chisel mine wouldn't work like yours, but I do look at music that way. It's like, there is a lyrical aspect to music, just as there is a musical aspect to lyrics, but but it's like when you hear a song and it's like there's some kind of message, there's lyrics trying to crawl out from that music. And so the job of when you take the role of a lyricist, it's like my job is to make sure that I'm trying to hear what that music is trying to say and then verbalize it, and just in the same way that someone would look at a lyric and going, how do I make this be musical, but anyway, that's always the way I've kind of looked at it and think of the challenge. And sometimes I've, started down a path and writing a lyric to a certain piece of music and go, these two are not married. This is not, I'm forcing something. This is not what this piece of music is trying to say. Scrap, so, so it's a delicate dance, and and because once you've figured out, okay, this is the path I'm heading down with this lyric, then you have to commit in order to try, so, anyway, that's kind of the way that I look at it. But like I said, I don't consistently and rigidly do it like that and only that,
Right.
But maybe 80% of the time, that's the way it goes. Either working off of a title, or working off of or working from scratch. Rarely is there a full fleshed out piece of poetry that
Right.
Hey, we're going to press pause here. An episode that includes a Grammy Song of the Year would normally stand on its own, but there's just too much good stuff to stop now. So I want to invite you back for part 2, where we'll dive into Wayne's work as a Broadway composer and hear about a documentary on the history of board games he's currently developing. Whether you're into pop music or musical theater, there are gems all over both of these episodes. So we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for jumping in on part 1. And in the meantime, go make something.